Agut Moed. Today is the 18th day of Nissan, the birthday of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schnerson. And as you know by Chassidim, the Rebbe is our father who teaches us and gives us everything lovingly that we need. And by definition, the Rebbe's parents are our grandparents. On the 18th day of Nissan in 1878, a great holy soul descended into this world, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schnerson, and he gave us the greatest gift of them all, the shining giant soul of the Rebbe who illuminates the entirety of the world. So on the day of a birthday, when Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schnerson's soul and the Neshama shines so strongly, and his mazel shines so strongly, it's an opportune moment for us to honor the Rebbe's parents, to honor the Rebbe's father, and by extension we're honoring the Rebbe, and at the same time to realize and recognize it's a wonderful moment to wish each other l'chaim, to wish each other blessings and brachas and good wishes and good health and all the things that we need, because on this very special day, the holy soul of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schnerson, came into this world. By the way, the Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch that one should say a Beir Pri Agafen and drink a cup of wine every day of Chol HaMoed, the middle days of Yom Tif, in honor of the holiday of Pesach. So l'chaim, may Hashem grant you all the desires of your heart with happiness, with good health and long life, and together may we all merit to see the coming of Mashiach now, l'chaim. The Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schnerson, was a rabbi, chief rabbi, I should say, of the great city, Dnepropetrovsk, Yekaterinoslav at the time, which had well over 100,000 Jews amongst its citizens. It was a very large Jewish city in the Ukraine. He was a young man when he accepted the mantle of leadership of that city, and originally he had great opposition because he was a Hasidic rabbi. But ultimately, everybody embraced him, and everybody had deep respect for the Rebbe's father, to the degree that we know that the night of the Rebbe's chasana, the Rebbe's wedding, when the Rebbe got married in Poland, and the vicious communists would not allow the Rebbe's parents to join their oldest child on the night of his own wedding, he celebrated in his home, which I, thank God, had the opportunity to see, 13 Barankaya in the city of Dnepropetrovsk, and to their great shock and amazement, over 300 people came under strict illegal terms, and they congregated while the KGB was watching, and they were risking their life to be there with Rabbi Levi Yitzchak on the night of his son's wedding, as his heart yearned, together with Rebbe Tzanachana, to be together physically with their son, the Rebbe, in Poland. But nevertheless, 300 Jews from every single congregation throughout the city, regardless of their perspective and persuasions, and they all joined together till the crack of dawn to celebrate that whole night, which shows you the love and affection that the people of the city had for this great holy tzaddik, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schnerson. It was the 9th day of Nissan, just a few days before Passover and Pesach in 1939, when a black car pulled up to their address, 13 Barakaya, in the city of Dnepropetrovsk. And unfortunately, a few KGB agents came out and they searched the home and they ultimately arrested the Rebbe's father. And from there, unfortunately, he never returned. He was imprisoned for a number of months and then exiled to the remote country of Kazakhstan at the time, which was primarily an exile country. And there, on Tu B'Shvat, the following year when he arrived, was sent to the remote village of Chile, which is approximately a 16 to 18 hour car ride from Almaty, which was the capital city then, all the way to the other side of the country, to the village of Chile, which is in the region of Gzilarda. And unfortunately there, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak and later his wife joined him voluntarily. The Rebbe Tzanchana spent 5 hard, difficult years where in the winter it's terribly cold, and in the summer it's unbearably hot. It's 110 degrees, sometimes 115 degrees, where the mosquitoes don't stop biting, and all types of insects are flying around. And it was a very, not exactly a high-class society, as we say. It was a primitive culture that lived there. And amongst anti-Semites and those who had no appreciation whatsoever for who this great holy man was, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak lived the 5 last years of his life. And then a day or two after Pesach, thank God, they were able to somehow arrange tickets, and he arrived to the city of Almatah, where he was greeted by the local Jewish community, the Raskin brothers, and many others who helped and participated. And thank God he had some freedom. But unfortunately, that reprieve lasted very short, because less than 4 months later, the Rebbe's father passed away on the 20th of Av, Chaf Av, that same year. And he was interred, and his ohel, his holy resting place, is today across the street from the Chabad house in Almatah, Kazakhstan, in the Jewish cemetery. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was told by the Russians, Rabbi, if you stay in shul and you take care of those seniors who come to synagogue, we won't bother you. But please, do not go out of your way to do any special programs, and certainly stay away from the youth. Because to the communists, it wasn't the United States of America that was the greatest threat to them, but it was the threat if a Jewish child would study the Aleph Beis, if Jewish continuity was to go on to the next generation, to the Russians, that was the ultimate threat. And as a result, they threatened Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, stay put. Obviously, the Rebbe's father was committed and loved every single Jew, especially the youth. And he did everything possible to make sure and to ensure that no Jewish child is left behind, and every Jewish child is given all the opportunities possible under the circumstances for a Jewish education. And ultimately, he paid for all of this with his life. So on a day like today, when the soul of the Rebbe's father comes into this world, and Mazalei gave it, his mazel shines strong, it is up to us, his grandchildren, to be able to prove that Zayda, your efforts did not go in vain. You continue to live on in the hearts and minds and actions of your grandchildren all over the world who observe this great holy special day by strengthening ourselves in greater commitment to Torah and mitzvahs, to love a fellow Jew unconditionally, and to help each other, especially in trying times as we're going through now, to make sure that no Jewish person is left behind, and the needs of every single individual, man, woman, and child, are completely taken care of. In 1935, the Rebbe's father's relative, Rabbi Zalman Schnerson, left the former Soviet Union, the Iron Curtain, and he was traveling to the Holy Land of Israel. The Shabbos before he left, they made a Tzeis L'Shalom, as it's known in Yiddish, a goodbye Shabbos, and many guests from throughout the Soviet Union came to say their goodbyes. My grandfather, Rabbi Zalman Butman, my father's father, had the schus and the merit to be the one in charge of taking care of the technical issues of making sure that every single person has a place to stay, and so on and so forth. Of course, since the greatest giant that came for this Shabbos was the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schnerson, who was already then known as an unbelievable Torah scholar and a giant in his own right, was given the nicest room available, the most comfortable bed, and so on. It was Shabbos morning when Rabbi Levi Yitzchak exited his room, and my grandfather decided he wants to just make sure that the room is taken care of so there's nothing missing. And to his great surprise, when he peeked into the room, he noticed that the bed has not been touched. He prepared it, and the bed obviously was not touched. He knows what it looked like. It bothered him, and he wasn't sure perhaps he did something wrong. So he approached the Rebbe's father respectfully, and he asked, may I ask a question in Yiddish? And he said, sure. And he said, I noticed since I prepared the bed that you haven't used it. Is everything okay? To which the Rebbe's father responded, tell me something. Where did you receive all the pillows and blankets? In the Yiddish, the word is betgewand, all the needs for the bed. My grandfather responded that many guests came for Shabbos, and obviously he didn't have enough in his possession. He said, so I went to a non-Jewish woman who has a business in town, in Moscow, and she rents out whatever you need for beds and so on, pillows, blankets, and I rented from her whatever I needed. To which the Rebbe's father responded the following words in Yiddish. Ich will mein Kopf auf ihr Kissen nicht legen. Once more time. Ich will mein Kopf auf ihr Kissen nicht legen. Loosely translated, I will not place my head on her pillow. The Rebbe's father sensed that this stuff and the pillows and the blankets and so on are not coming from a pure source. And therefore, the Rebbe's father didn't go to sleep all night long, a whole Friday night, because a Jew must know where to put your head. The lessons of the story are many. But in Hasidic thinking, in Tanya, we are taught that the brain is the parents and the emotions are the children. You feel what you first thought about in your mind. They are your offspring of your mind, of your thoughts. And perhaps Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was saying amongst other messages, you are a Jew. You have something holy in your mind. You have a neshama, you have a soul. Where are you putting your head? Could it be that it's difficult times and you would like to put your head into negative thoughts and to sad thoughts and to complicated thoughts and to difficult, challenging thoughts? Rabbi Levi Yitzchak comes along and says, careful. Ich will mein Kopf auf ihr Kissen nicht legen. I will not place my head where it doesn't belong. As we all experience now together as one, this great challenge, which God will bless us all to triumph and persevere and come out on the other side successfully and healthy. But we need to make sure that we don't, God forbid, place our heads in negative places where we start thinking negative and bad thoughts, etc., which can only bring us down. So a day like today, when the Rebbe's father gave birth and brought down to this world the holy soul of the Rebbe himself, who continues to illuminate the world, we see how powerful this day is. May we all take strength to gather the courage for whatever we need to do and to march forward and not to look at the negatives to our right and to our left, but continue marching on the path to victory, and with God's help, we will certainly arrive at our destination. Today also marks 8 days after the 11th day of Nissan, which is the birthday of the Rebbe, as we know. And 8 days later, of course, is the bris. In 1902, on today's date, the Rebbe's grandfather was 24 years old, exactly on his 24th birthday, when this great occasion took place. So he had a double mazel tov on his 24th birthday. And in that city is where the Rebbe went to school, to Cheder. And as we know, the Rebbe said, from the day I went to Cheder. And the Rebbe was a young child when he went to Cheder, 4 or 5 years old. But the Rebbe adds the two words, Veit Kaidem Laz, even before that. I already began to think, what's the future going to hold for us when Mashiach is going to come? How is God going to compensate for all of the pain and the suffering and the difficulties that the Jewish people have gone through throughout the generations? The Rebbe was only a young child. I don't think ever in history we had a Jewish leader who testified upon himself that from my early childhood, I wasn't worried about myself. I wasn't worried about my immediate family. I wasn't even worried about my city or my town. I was worried for the world, for Jews all over the world and for the world at large. When will God take us out of this difficulty of the exile and bring us to the day of Mashiach's coming? There's a book that I just read yesterday, part of it, on Shabbos. And with your permission, I'd like to share a story that the Rebbe's, it's recorded actually in the Hebrew. And I would like to use the book because I want to give it over to you with relative accuracy. And it is a story of a young fellow that came to the Rebbe for a private meeting in an audience in 770 Eastern Parkway. and I believe that the story has tremendous relevance to us in many, many ways. The story reads, there was a young man who started to become close to Jewish observance. Translation is loosely mine. He came into the Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, I'm having a difficult time. Why is it so hard to embrace Torah and its commandments? The more I try, I seem to encounter more and more challenges, and God is testing me all the time. The Rebbe said to him, well, we are not angels. We are human beings. Angels have no tests. They serve God without any difficulties. But we are given from heaven tests, challenges, in order to use them as a ladder to climb higher and higher. The young man was not satisfied with the answer and couldn't understand. And the Rebbe said to him, I see you're not satisfied with what I just said. Can you please tell me, what is your hobby? The fellow said, my hobby? I love art. The Rebbe said to him, may I ask you, which is your most favorite portrait of all the arts in the world? He said, yes, Picasso. The Rebbe asked him, which portrait and painting of Picasso do you love most? And then the fellow began to describe Sunset, the famous drawing where you see the beachfront as the sun is setting and young children are playing and an elderly couple is walking. He said, this portrait has great meaning to me. It symbolizes, as the sun sets now, tomorrow the sun will rise again. And you see the children who don't even realize and don't pay attention to the fact that the elders are walking right past them. A generation goes and a generation comes. This inspires my emotions deeply. Upon listening to all of this, the Rebbe said to the young man, do you know how much this portrait is worth? The fellow answered, certainly. As a matter of fact, recently, Sotheby's had a public sale on it, and they sold it for $8 million. The Rebbe continued and asked, if next to Picasso, as Picasso was painting this portrait, stood a fellow with a simple camera in his hands and took a picture of the gorgeous scenery as the sun is setting, the children and the elderly, tell me please, says the Rebbe to the young man, which would be more accurate? Do you think Picasso would have been more accurate in his portrait and painting? Or do you think the camera would capture it with greater accuracy? Certainly, the young man answered, of course, the camera. And how much would that cost? Asked the Rebbe. A printed version of a copy of the photo? The young man said, well, I would imagine that a simple photo would only cost about 25 cents. Said the Rebbe to the young fellow, I don't understand. Could you please explain to me, why would you pay for a portrait $8 million, but for an accurate picture, you would only pay 25 cents? The young man remained silent, couldn't come up with a straight answer. The Rebbe continued and said, do you know why? Because cameras never make a mistake. It's only a machine. It works automatically. But the human being is full of mistakes and always makes mistakes. And therefore, something that was created by the human being indeed is worth $8 million. Because the artist, as he draws the portrait, invests his entire soul in this portrait. He expresses his emotions, his perspective, and you can see the feelings of the artist if you look deeply into his portrait. The experiences he had in his life before, and how he projects them all and deposits them into his portrait and his painting. In the same veins, continued the Rebbe, God Almighty also has billions of angels in heaven. They never make a mistake. but they are not as precious as a Jew. Their prayers are not worth anything close to what one Jew says as he opens up the Shacharis prayer with the words, Haidu la Hashem, Kiru v'shmai, give thanks to God, call out his name. And the Rebbe concluded, all the failures and tests that a human being goes through are not meant to take you down, but on the contrary, they are meant to make you happy because you can grow even higher. Every time you fail, that is evidence that you are indeed a human being and not a machine. If the first time you were not successful and your prayers were not the way they should have been, don't worry about it. Next time you will put in greater effort and your prayers will be even better. The failure is an opportunity for you to transform it into light. The story is very powerful. There is so much that matches up to current events. We are going through a tremendous challenge. The human being is struggling. And the Rebbe says to us, just do me one favor. Why this is happening, only God knows. That's not our business. Why? Nobody has that answer. But look at it. Once you're there already, try to find the silver lining and maximize the opportunity. Instead of it being a tragedy, it should turn into an opportunity of growth. The Rebbe's vision, as we know, is always to grow, never to stagnate. Indeed, as we said the Haggadah, I couldn't help but notice, as we raised our cup of wine, V'hi sha'amdan, this promise kept us going. In the Hebrew, the Rebbe adds one line. What kept us going? One word the Rebbe writes, ha'haftacha, the promise and the guarantee from Almighty God that we would indeed be liberated and the exile would not go on forever, and ultimately the Jewish people merited to celebrate, as we are doing right now, the liberation from the land of Egypt. The Passover Seder empowers us. This is a moment to climb the ladder. Could it be that we are on the bottom of the ladder when we're full of challenges? Absolutely. The good news is, the ladder is an opportunity for all of us to grow. So in conclusion, allow me to say this. As we celebrate the Rebbe, the 18th day of Nissan, as we celebrate the power that's invested in us, as we celebrate the opportunity that stands right in front of us today, to climb the ladder that even the angels of heaven cannot climb, precisely because they have no challenges. It is the challenges which create the tension which allows you to jump forward and upward to greater heights. So l'chaim, may God grant us, as we say in Yiddish, the seichel, not to be bogged down by the negativity, not to allow our minds to be focused on the painful things, although we must pay attention, obviously, to certain things that are hurting us. But at the same time, don't put your head in the wrong place. Don't put your head where thoughts that are going to bring you down are going to be created in your mind. Focus on the positive. Focus on the Rebbe's father. Realize how for 5 long years the Rebbe's parents had such a challenging time. But they made it out of that little village. And they made it to Almata. They made it, so to speak, to freedom. And their son made it all the way to the United States. And today there isn't a place on the planet Earth where a Jewish community doesn't know who is the one leader today that cares for every Jew around the world, and indeed even for non-Jews, and wants, together with the 7 Noahide laws, to make sure that all of us merit to see a time of peace and harmony. As Maimonides concludes his book, that when Mashiach will come, there will not be any illness, no sickness, no jealousy, no war, for the world will be busy and occupied in studying the greatness of its Creator. With health and happiness, may Almighty God grant us, we should celebrate that speedily in our very own day, that this very Passover, we should be able to say, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, we are in Yerushalayim, and obviously by next year we'll be able to continue to be there with the coming of Mashiach now, l'chaim.